So that's that part backwards, the one that that bass that had the LFO, excuse me, an envelope on it. That's yeah, that's one note. So I just printed it to audio and then just reversed it. That's all. So what's that? Oh, just in the sample editor itself, under the functions menu, there's reverse. So just highlighted it and reversed it. So I'll play this portion of the track so you can hear this part. So it's just a transition every few measures. There's a different note, just same sound. And there it is forward. So what's that? I think that's just related. Like I think that's just the tail on it. I'm not sure. There's no real good reason for it. I could have just delete that out. It's not, the silence isn't doing anything. But yeah, so that part is just mainly a transitional effect. So you can. And the other bass part, this is the one that's from the peak section. Here's the triangle. And the goal is hopefully to give you the illusion that that's all one part, like that's one line. And so that's something that I like to do a lot, that a lot of drum and bass producers do all the time. That's where I learned the technique from, is you have multiple bass things that are happening, and you just find really great notes, and you print them to audio, and you use them again and again. But if you put them, their placement is strategic, like in their arrangement. You don't think of it as like, oh, there's a bunch of different bass lines happening, or a bunch of different bass sounds. It all kind of, you sort of interpolate it together, and it just sounds like one part. So okay, yeah, so I'm running. This session's a little bit insane for this computer, so I don't know that I'm gonna be able to play it. But basically, this is where it starts to bridge between that. And so part of this process of taking the bass sounds from that peak section is what helped me figure out how to bridge between that, the new idea with that sculpture melody and everything, and the original idea, which happens later on here. And like over time, I added more layers of bells and things like that. Just I wanted natural sounds with it, and then that sculpture thing in there. And you can hear also that the trilogy bass line part that's in there is a lot more active than it was before. I think. Oh, that's not this one. Let's see what that is. So before it was just long sustaining notes, and this one I gave it more activity. Again, that's sort of that frou-frou song, Let Go. I just loved the bass line in that, and I loved the way it moved. So just because something like this is slow, this song's 84 BPM, so it's, in some ways it's like a drum and bass ballad, you know. So it's like I wanted it to feel like that it had some movement, and so adding in these sort of syncopated bass parts with it. And I also tried to have the harmony change over time too. Like it basically repeats, but certain times I'll hit a different note and it makes a different chord against the rest of the things that are happening. And that you know ends up being nice. So let's see if there's any other ones in here. And that's gonna also I'll show you some of these final sessions for Parks on Fire when it's kind of all together, just what it looks like. Again, I'm not sure how well I'm gonna be able to play it back because I don't have a lot of the things that are on here, but so you can see each time that sometimes it gets a little bit neater, but it also gets bigger in terms of the number of tracks and everything. So here's pretty much in its full form. Let's see. So I'm not going to play the whole thing, but so I've gotten to this middle section. Then here's where I started to figure out how to transition to the peak section. And so some things cut out here. This isn't because it's not I don't have all my echoes and things that, but let's see. So then here's where it starts to build with those acoustic guitars. And so I was able to make this sort of build up and then, reach a peak, which happens over here. And then after this, it drops into that main. And so this is basically where this is towards the end of it, but before it's really mixed properly, but still it's kind of like and so this is probably more than a year after when I'd started, but it was coming together and I was like, oh, this is turning out good. So I think I'll show you just one more, like where I believe it's pretty much before stemmed. And again, as I went further with this, because I was working on older computers and things like that, I would bounce everything to audio. And then also that in turn, I could just have a really tight control over everything and make sure that everything, cut off all the right moments. Yes.
You showed us a pretty extreme EQ earlier. Do you often just go in and immediately start sculpting the sounds?
Yes. I mean, it depends on what it's for. Usually I don't do extreme EQing at all because it just makes things worse. But sometimes if you have to reshape a sound. So I think I was showing you that the clicking sounds, which had way too much mid and bottom in it, and I just wanted that to be at the really top range. So just high passed it really high and then boosted the 10K or whatever to just in an extreme amount just to get it brighter. And again, with a sound like that too, it's not, you can really, since it's not, in some ways it's almost not even a musical sound, you can be pretty extreme with it, but yes.
Do you ever explore using sub basses under some of the Reese's? The triangle bass sound pretty thick and full, but the other bass, I was wondering, even kicks and snares and stuff, do you ever go into that realm, or you just kind of...
Yeah, I mean, in some ways that's what that trilogy bass that has a lot of movement to it is acting as. That's sort of like the sub, and then the other ones are more, even though that some of that triangle hit has a lot of bass in it, but the other one's pretty thin. Yeah, and so in that one's, but also that's sort of not even serving a bass function. It's more of a transition.
I was wondering, everything kind of has its space. You don't want to overload and give it kind of more anticipation for the thicker bass to come back in.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, and that's part of making something dynamic, which is always a struggle. And I feel like with this, it worked out pretty well because that, like you're saying, that sort of that envelope bass. It doesn't really have much low end or much balls to it at all, but it sort of transitions into these bigger bass hits happening, and that gives it this sense of dynamics in the low end. Because the thing I was worried about when we were getting close to done with this, and that actually helped in terms of when we had it mastered, was just reining in the bass too, because it can get over, having a constant sub like that can be overwhelming. Yeah, for sure. So I think that's and again, that's something to even get to that point with something. It's you need perspective on it. You can get way too lost if you hear something enough times. Your mind plays tricks on you. You know what I mean? And you're oh, that works. And even though it's so busy or so intense, and it takes a while. You step away from it, you listen to it again, you're like, wow, that's really kind of way too much happening. So, yes.
What's the on the internet? What's the best place for mid-range bass in the frequency spectrum?
Well, I mean, that's hard to say exactly. I think it really depends on the context. Usually, if you have a sub bass that's happening underneath it, then you probably wouldn't want your mid bass to be going down to 80 or anything like that. So it's I don't know. It kind of depends on the sounds. I don't know. I don't have a formula for it, nor do I feel like I'm totally an expert in terms of getting that knowing exactly how to layer it. I just sort of I usually end up having to do some experimentation of okay, here's my sub bass, and I use a high pass filter to figure out when is it conflicting with a mid bass or another part, and basically try to eliminate the mud, or sometimes end up side chaining the other parts to like if there's a bass hit that's happening, like side chain that to bring down the level of the main like sub bass that's constantly happening. But I don't know. As time goes on, like again, this was a couple years ago, and I feel like I've learned more about and gotten better at mixing and EQing. So I'm not sure how I would approach it now, but yeah, at the time it was sort of the sub bass was just trying to distinguish that from mid bass, just putting a high pass on the mid bass and playing around with the cutoff point until it seemed like it fit okay together.
So in that situation, will you just sidechain the sub bass to the kick and leave the mid-range bass alone out of that?
Well, I mean, in this song, the kick doesn't have any bass, so it's more in some ways like traditional drum and bass. Like the drums that are happening for most of it really don't have any bass. So they don't interfere too much. So I don't have anything sidechained to the kick. But what I had is that triangle stab. At some point in one of these sessions, that's side chained to the sub bass, so that when that hits, it brings down. So be a compressor on the sub bass track, and the side chain trigger would be that triangle wave bass that would be activating it to bring down the level of the sub bass when that hits, because that had bass energy in it as well. So I think let's see, this session here is where it's getting pretty full, and yeah, I'll just show you one more session for this, and then if there's any more questions about Parks and Fire, and then I think it'd be nice to take like a little 5-minute break or whatever. So let's see here. So I'll just show you one last session for here of what's going on. The mastering was by Roger Siebel, and so he's in a place in Phoenix called SAE Mastering. He's great. He does like he did a lot of like rock records in the 90s, because we wanted, like, because the nature of sort of the Emergence album was like, it's not like a banging, dance music or anything. So we wanted something that was like warm, and also he had mastered Apparat's Walls, which is an album that like both Lawrence and I really love, and I thought sounded fantastic. And in that it did a nice balance of like sounding like an electronic album, but also sounding kind of like a rock album. And so we went with him, and he did a great job. We actually attended the mastering session because I'd never, sort of seen a mastering engineer in action, and it was really cool to see how he did, and just and it made a big difference because it's like mixing is an art and a process, and I got it to as good as I could get it, and then when you go and take something to a mastering engineer and you're sitting there and you listen to it on their perfectly tuned room, it's like, and you see what they do to, like, in terms of like, he just did a little bit of notching out certain frequencies to make things sit better, and I just imagine there was more magic to mastering. It's very subtle. It's like like tiny EQ notches, very low amounts of compression, but like all like just he had like all these outboard compressors, and it was hitting each one just like very little, just a little bit on each one, but just the whole chain sounds amazing. But there was no like, I don't know. I thought there was more like wizardry or some magical thing, and it, and also it also shows you like what mastering can do in terms of like it can make something a little bit better, but it's not going to transform. Like really your mix has to be good, and so it's and that's an ongoing process, I think, for anyone that produces music is working on mixing. So so this session is where I think these were the pretty much stems, and I had stuff automating, and probably things are sent to buses. Like that's usually a reasonable way to do things, like to have your different parts like bass and like beats and bells and little micro sounds and synth snarls and things like that all on separate, be able to have kind of a group control over it, and make more macro adjustments. Because sometimes when I'm in the production process, I don't think too much about mixing or grouping stuff, like, because I don't know where I'm going yet. So sort of in the later stage, I was able to do that more. So this is just basically a stem session of the, sort of all the different tracks and whatever. And the nice thing is that when you guys leave tonight, you're gonna get sent an email that has a download link to stems for this track and for the track live, so you can take a look at all these different parts if there's anything that you wanted to see of like what's happening in it. So I have it all stemmed out, and you can, since it's just audio stems, you can drag it into any DAW and take a look at it. So Yeah. Is there any questions more about Parks on Fire or any of the process of it? Otherwise, it'd be cool to we'll take a little 5-minute break and then we can carry on with some cover some different ground, talk about lies and some vocal stuff. Yes.
Did you put a limiter on your master?
I didn't. On some of these sessions, I have a limiter. That's just because I don't want to clip like the output here. But no, I don't like do any mixing with a limiter on it. Yes.
Just another question about mixing. Before it got sent off to mastering, how much headroom did you leave?
A lot. I think that probably the highest peak was at I mean it wasn't even approaching 0. I mean I think I left more than they usually or even need to or supposed to. But like a friend of mine is a guy named John Rod, is a scoring mixer. He mixes a bunch of film scores, and he's more of a traditional engineer. And so I asked his advice about a lot of things. And I think it's different for electronic music, and than sometimes other things. But he was said to like leave tons of headroom, and so I did. And I think it's no like on the mastering end, it's not like they have any problem making up like making it loud. It's just making something sound musical and as good as it can. And Will.
Let's see. One question: how much was sample based versus your own recordings in this track?
Yeah, so a lot of, especially the melodic instruments, like all the bells and things, are sample based in the sense that it's multi-samples, like from the different east-west instruments. I really love, because I mean, I'm probably, well, I don't even necessarily have access to a lot of the instruments, like a harp, for example, and then to take the time to borrow one, multi-sample every note, map it, and do velocity mapping. Like I'd rather just purchase, a multi-sample and use it, and especially because I do outside of Trifonic, we do other work for licensing things and composing and stuff, and we're definitely trying to get involved in a lot more of that too. And so it's just to be able to have a whole bunch of realistic instruments, and really what I like in terms of synthetic sounds is mainly just bass parts, and then I have tons and tons of sounds that are based on guitars. So lots of layers of guitar harmonics, and most of the pads are based on, they start as some kind of organic material, like whether it be that steel drum with a reverb on it, or a lot of in other stuff, the pads with are made from guitars as a starting place. And I really like for the ambient sounds them to, they're usually either reverbed or granular, stretched out organic sounds. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yes. Questions we have. Do you always recommend to let other people master your music versus doing it yourself?
Yeah. Well, in my case, yes. Just because like I usually don't have perspective on it, and honestly, if you don't have a perfectly tuned room or perfectly know your system, I think it's much smarter. And there's people that do mastering that isn't that expensive that are really good. I mean, even in the Bay Area here, there's a guy, Sean Hatfield, he makes music under the name Twerk, and like he masters songs for basically like $30 a song or $40 a song, and I think he does an excellent job. We had him do we did an EP called the Remergence EP, which is basically where we did remixes of some of these tracks from Emergence, and we had Sean master it, and he did a great job. I think it sounds amazing. So, and that was very cheap. Like the guy that we went to in Phoenix, he's still very reasonably priced, but it's by the hour, and it's probably something of maybe $100 an hour or something, and the whole album ended up being probably $800 or that range, which is still pretty cheap in terms, like you can spend a lot on mastering. Like people spend a fortune on it, and the difference between the $800 mastering and the $40 or $100 mastering was, I mean, there's definitely a difference, but in our case, it was maybe a 5% difference. So, I don't know. Sometimes that 5% is worth spending the extra amount on, and other times it's great. Like, if people, like someone like Sean in the Bay Area does a great job, and I mean, he's underselling it. So, yeah. Okay.
Someone was asking about, let's see, is there anything to say about playing the live performance of Parks on Fire?
Okay, in terms of the live performance of Parks on Fire, a lot of there's stems in the background that are playing because there's no way to really recreate it. But what I do, the cheat method, which I can actually show here, I'm just going to create a new session real quick. because I do this with a lot of instruments, is I map the whole melody part, that sculpture melody, just chromatically on the keyboard so that I can never mess it up, because I just play the keys in order, and and it's already the processed sound. I just cut each note, like where it begins and ends, and added a little bit of reverb or delay tail so that I don't have to hit it right on in time, but I can just play chromatically on the keyboard, and it ends up being the right part. So let's see if I'm just gonna create a little empty session here, and I don't know that I have that instrument on here, but let me see, because that would be, it's entertaining to look at. Okay, so yeah, I have a feeling I don't have that here, but I do have some other ones that are sort of where I lay things out in that kind of way. So this is actually related. So the song Emergence, when we perform live, I play some pads in the background. So here I can turn this up a little bit. And basically, what these are is a bunch of different things that all work together in the same key. But they don't relate necessarily to the keys that I'm playing here. Like chromatically, like this isn't a C and this isn't a D. But these all work together in the same key. And so I can play any combination and get something really beautiful. So I use this also for writing too, because it's just a good way to get an idea started. Because anything, or let's see, just get really complex chords of layers of different hits happening. And if I'm working on a track and it's a different key, then I just cheat and take the whole thing and transpose it. So that's sort of one way but that's how I approach live performance too, is I'll sometimes map things out on keys, but make it really simple in terms of, and then a lot of it's just playing around with, I can adjust the level of some of the stems. I use Ableton Live to perform, and and have filters and things assigned to different knobs, but yeah.
And will there ever be a new Trifonic album?
There will be. It's in the works. There's a lot of good things in progress. Yes, sooner rather than later, hopefully. But yeah, sometime this year. So why don't we take a little short break here for like 5 minutes? I'm gonna grab some water, and then we can pick back up with some more stuff. Yeah, so originally I was thinking that, I would just go through the songs like each bit by bit, like go through lies next. And I think I'll kind of go faster through that, but first this instrument layout I think is interesting, and I'll want to sort of explore what I like to do in terms of sample kits a bit, just because I think that it's, I don't know, that's a big part of the workflow, especially now. Like the more that time goes on, I don't have the same amount of time to spend on things. Like I have to get things done quicker. I'd also like to finish new music. So I've tried to set up ways that I can have things that I can just go to and quickly pull up and start to be inspired and make music. So I spend a lot of time doing, creative sound design, and separately from songs. Like I don't work on music at the same time. Like I'll spend a day just designing sounds and trying to come up with like stuff that creates a certain mood. And spending the time to not always map it in a really interesting way, but like for example, this kit that I started as like a way to perform live. Like I said, everything's sort of in the same key. So I just, I have all the different samples from it, and then this coarse tuning here, which is in semitones. I would listen against the track Emergence, and then just play around with the coarse tuning until it worked. But that ended up being a really useful way of getting all kinds of sounds. And there's a couple kits that you'll hear that I reuse all the time. So this is one of them. This is always a good starting place. Another one that I use is this one that's of my friend David singing. So this is just also kind of works together in the same key. It's just these notes that sustain, reverbed out. So they don't necessarily follow the pitch of what I'm playing. I'm just playing chromatically on this keyboard. And some of this is phrases too. And these effects are all happening, they're already printed to the sample, because I liked this really long reverb. Something like that. I just like the echoes. This was just the reverb tail, and that ended up working out nice. This is a note that I use all the time in the song Infiltration, and actually in a lot of other songs too. And this one too. Almost everything I work on has these two notes in it in some form or another. So basically, my friend David, he recorded vocals on the song Good Enough, and he sang on some other things as well. And so I just did a session with him of just like, that as sort of an add-on to when he was recording, just to have him sing notes that were within his range. But playing combinations of these ends up being really musically useful. And again, depending on the key of the song I'm working on, I can just retune here, And it changes the quality. I mean, it sounds more like a, bigger person or something like that. But a lot of times it still kind of works, even pitched up a bit. Within the range of maybe a minor third, it all kind of works okay. So I like to construct kits that way, and I'll show you a couple others that are sort of like that. Let's see. There's this one that's, and some of the people that have taken my synth class here, they've all seen this before, but I think that for everyone else, this is hopefully pretty interesting. So this one is, it's called Guitarded Pads, and that's because the method of this was really ridiculous. So these sound, well, I'll play you the sounds first, and then I can talk a little bit about the process of them, which is a little embarrassing. It's all these kind of really nice, like atmospheric and weird stuff too. And if I go higher up, there's ones that are distorted. So this is a kit. Again, it's not really mapped to any pitch, but these all kind of work together. And I always use these to set a certain mood. Like I like to create a setting for a song, and a lot of times that has to do with the ambience in it. And so what these were was that one day Lawrence and I were in the studio, and we realized that when the certain notes would hit, they would resonate my acoustic guitar, the strings would vibrate, and we thought that was pretty cool. It sounded good, and so then just as a joke, we just started to yell into the guitar, like into the hole, and it resonates, and we're like, oh, that's cool. And we'd also just watched Team America, so it has a lot of quotable lines in it, so we were just quoting the movie, yelling offensive things into the guitar hole, and then recording the resonance of it, and then just cutting out the original, basically like the impulse, like cutting out the yell, removing that from the audio file. But then you can hear in some of this in the background, you can hear us laughing and or the breathing in. Let me set the attack on this a little bit shorter. So you can hear on that one, like there's the breath in to yell, and when you yell, it's usually you have to get a lot of air in there, and then you have the ringing out. So it's these really, I don't know, some nice sounds, and depending on how you tune the guitar, you get different drones that ring out. And then some of it we did some spectral processing too, like you can hear that that this is a little bit smeared. And for that, I'll just show you that there's a bunch of freeware audio units if you're using Mac. That's the Michael Norris spectral plugins, and they're just amazing. Like you can turn anything into a pad. Like here, I'll just show you. So spectral drone maker. Well, you know what? I'm not going to put it on this track. So the best way to demonstrate things that I've learned is with Apple loops. You just take something that's like really canned, and if you can turn it into something cool, then you know that the process is cool. So let's see. Okay, so that little jazz thing here, we're gonna turn this into like some kind of crazy pad. So hopefully, if my computer can handle the processing on this. These are intensive. New computers shouldn't have any problem, but as it starts to get older, it's my computer struggles sometimes a little bit with this kind of stuff. So Michael Norris, Spectral Drone Maker, really beautiful one. So, oh, that's just the Apple Loop playing back without anything. Oh, it's because I have it on the wrong track. But thank you to Logic 9. I can do that. There we go. And let me turn this down too. So it's like instant cinematic pad. So, and that's just, this is the default setting, but you can change like how it, like you can have it do fifths or bring out the octaves more in here. You can affect the brightness, and all these other parameters in here. And you can also adjust the FFT size. So that's basically it's going to split it up into frequency bins, and you can adjust the number of those, and it's going to change the characteristics. So the higher it is, usually the more like realistic or the more characteristic of the original sound it kind of keeps, and lower. Some reason I feel like it actually for this kind of smearing sound, it sounds good at like lower, like as opposed to like really high resolution FFT. But yeah, so there's 23 free plugins from Mike Norris that all do this kind of stuff. Yes?
Just to clarify, that was smearing it just by adding all those effects at once?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, I don't know exactly what it's doing. It's like it's stretching out, I guess, the different frequency bands, but I mean, basically it's just, I just pulled that up, and here's the audio file that it's processing. So, and it takes a second. But it's like really nice, like just the way it makes everything really moody. And then I can show you with a higher FFT size, assuming my computer can handle it. Let's see. It takes longer also for it to begin too. But it maintains more of the characteristic of the original sound. But to me, it's a little more cluttered because of that. But anyway, that's a good way of creating pads and things. Yeah?
I've never used Logic, but is that a specific Logic plugin?
Oh, no, this isn't specific to Logic. It's just an audio units plugin, so you could use it in like Ableton Live or, whatever supports audio units. I think, which is most of them support audio units because that's just the Apple one. But yeah, it's really nice. Like this whole series of them is really cool. Another thing, like, that's cool, just built in to like Logic, and again, you could do the similar things in Ableton with its time stretching as well. So you've got this flex time now in Logic, so you can stretch anything out. So it's got different modes. There's polyphonic mode, so I could take this same Apple Loop jazz sample, and just stretch it out. Like really stretch it out, and sometimes you get nice moments in that. That would be nice to sample from, like pull some little bit from it, like one note even. And if it's an Apple Loop that comes with it, you have the license to sample it. And you can stretch it for minutes, hours, and also sometimes trying the different algorithms too. You take the monophonic one and it can't handle all this action that's going on. It's going to be a lot, more chaotic. Sometimes you can get really nice bass notes out of this monophonic one because it can't handle. So, like all this kind of stuff, I love. I mean, of course, on its own, it's not really anything. You have to spend the time to comp through it and basically mine through it to find, maybe there's 1 second that's really nice in it and cut that out and use that. But when it comes down to it, I mean, like that's sort of where we are today in terms of like, because everyone has the same tools, just not everyone has the same amount of patience. So, or the same aesthetic or skills. But those things aside, like assuming that people can always sort of improve and that they have a certain aesthetic. You know, it really comes down to just taking the effort to do something, and that's can be challenging because, you know, sometimes there's just not much free time, and then secondly, it's, you know, you can forget your inspiration when, you know, if you just spend too much time just tweaking out with things. But in any case, those are just the sort of random two little things that I thought about that are that, you know, are ways that I like to process stuff, especially now with like Logic 9 and these you know, doing this. The flex audio is really crazy. There's also one that's this tempophone in here that actually has granular parameters for it. You can adjust its grain size, so it's the whole. Make it really. It takes a second for it to update, but here you can hear like really short grain size. Gets a whole different type of sound than if you have really audible grains, like these long ones. Get rid of the crossfade so that it's more punchy. And so I haven't explored yet, but I've thought about, you know, you could make all kinds of phase music like Steve Reich, Philip Glass style by having, you know, a couple of take the same track or the same sound and put it on a few different tracks and set different grain size because it's very consistent. It does, because it's not, this isn't like a granular synth in like a normal way, like where they often have randomization parameters. So this is very consistent sounding, so you can do cool things in terms of like phasing sounds and that sort. Anyway, back to just a second about the sort of the whole sound palette of and in creating these kits that makes it easier to create music. So there's this guitared one, like I was telling you about. And this ended up being really musical, despite its, you know, origin being kind of insane. But it's definitely something I end up using a lot in things. And you know, it's so sometimes like those crazy ideas you have are worth exploring. Another thing that let's see. So I have all kinds of bass sounds. Some of them are okay, some aren't great. One of them that's pretty nice is I've been messing around with the EMU E6400 hardware because it has it's a sampler. Just because it has a certain sound to it that's nice. It's just kind of I don't know what it is, but the processing inside it just doesn't sound good, but it sounds good at the same time. So I've been exploring that a lot and just creating bass sounds because it also has these sort of mythical Z-plane morphing filters, which basically is nothing that's all that special. It's just it can morph between different filter shapes. But whatever it is, the combination of the way it processes audio and its converters and the Z-plane filters, which sound pretty good, it can just you can get some nice sounds. So I've been exploring a lot with that. So I'll show you this bass sound. Because I like things that are like already sound really good to start with. Like I mean, and then I'll obviously have to tweak it more to make it fit in its context, but like that's already would take a long time to design a sound like that, to get something that's that sort of twisted. So I can kind of show you the process of that. So that's one of, you know, I've got this whole bunch here. These are my new ones that I haven't used on anything yet, but that are pretty. That are already, you know, pretty nasty. And then let's go through these. Well, you know, and it's one note, so when I play it back faster, you know, it plays back faster. But what I would do is I wouldn't play a whole bass line with this. I'd have one bass sound that's creating one part, and then this could be like a little extra, you know, bit that happens. Let's see. There's some of these are really. So all kinds of really twisted sounds to start with, and this is all. I spent literally an entire day, like a 12-hour day, with the EMU, like just with starting with one sound and then processing it again and again, time stretching it. So this is pretty. It's pretty cool. Yes, question. Yes, well, they're a big influence currently, like in terms of their production, because no one no one's as good as them in terms of the technical, in the genre of like drum and bass and like creating like crazy sounds like that. I don't think anyone even comes close. Or there's a couple people that are sort of in that. There's like Spore and this guy Calex, and they all are pretty unbelievable. It's not that I don't want to make that kind of music, because I mean, why compete when you have Noisia out there? So I just want to learn as much as I can. And this is what, just a general thing that's maybe good advice for people, or that I try to follow, is like, you don't have to compete with people. You kind of do your own thing. You steal the ideas that you like from what they're doing, and you can incorporate it. So Noisia, I love their bass sounds, and like I just, I don't want to compete with Noisia because I can't, but like I want to learn from what they do and incorporate the things I like into what I do. Yes.
And then someone had a question earlier about whether or not you're going to release sample libraries with some of your patches or pads. Or,
I've thought about that. It's something that if I have the time that I'd really like to do. So it's definitely, and there's been a couple of companies that we've talked to about that. So it's just an issue of what it would be and how much time it would take to do it. And also, I guess part of me wants to like finish music with it first, and then and then share it. So because I haven't done anything with these yet, but I feel like there's a lot I could do with them. So let's see, there's more here too. So mad bass sounds for days. I was exploring like the Doppler effects, processing those. And you play it up higher, has a different quality to it. I don't know if but the panning on that's pretty insane too. And let's see this one, like these wall of noise. I'm trying to step up my bass sounds. Basically, that's my goal for this month. So that one day of messing with this, I feel like I'm well on my way to stepping it up. So there's all kinds of, again, iterations of this. And it took a long time because I recorded each one out and then cut it up and made a kit. But I feel like it will be worth it. I don't even know how to make sounds like this. It was just spent like reprocessing the sound again and again. Let's see. And let's see, there's others. All variations on various wobbles. Let's see, I think there's one more that's cool. Yeah, it's EMU E6400. There's the E4 XT which is better. The thing that's amazing is that they're so cheap now, because like in the 90s, late 90s, that was like top of the line, $3,000 sampler. But no one wants to use hardware samplers anymore or deal with floppy disks or SCSI drives. So, they're basically doorsteps. I got mine, it was probably 4 to 5 years ago now, and I got it for $300, and it's a really well built. But that being said, it doesn't have a hard drive. If I want to save samples, it's floppy disks, which I don't bother with because it's way too slow. So basically, like, I have RAM memory in it. So when I turn it off, the sound is gone, and that's why I record everything that I do, and like literally dedicate a day to like, okay, this is what I'm going to do today, and because as soon as I turn it off, the sound is gone. So and I could, at some point I probably will invest in a SCSI hard drive and figure out how that all works, and so that I can save things. But right now, and I also don't have a way to load sounds in. So all these sounds are an iteration of one sound that started just ES2 in Logic. It was just basically, started with a basic detuned saw wave patch, and then played that into the input on the EMU, and then just in RAM in there, just processed it and recorded the output. And then there's also post-processing. There's distortions and things. In my session where I was editing together the samples, I tried to, accentuate like whatever weird characteristics the sound had, by with EQ and distortion. But then to just make a kit so that I have it at my fingertips. Let's see. But what's nice about some of these too is the pitch isn't quite exact. It kind of warbles, and it ends up being nice and moody.